What does it mean to be a self-giving husband? This is a concept that many husbands probably don't put too much thought into, but you really should if you want to show your wife love in a whole new way. Let's unpack this today.
Welcome to the Husband's Coach's Corner, the podcast that teaches husbands how to love their wife every day and become better men in the process. I'm your host, Chris Scott, aka The Husband Coach.
Welcome back to another episode of the Husband Coach's Corner. We are unpacking 4 attributes to show your wife love. Those 4 attributes are being mindful, graceful, approachable, and today we're talking about self-giving. Now, before we dive too deep into the content, I do want to let you know about marriagedrills.com. In the description box below of whatever platform you're listening to this on, you'll find a link. It'll take you to the website. There's a lot of things you can do on that website, which one of them is joining my email list. Or you can suggest a podcast topic. And if you want to support this podcast, then consider buying me a coffee. The link is also in the description. Now, last week we talked about being approachable. This week, we're going to be talking about the attribute of self-giving. Now, the definition of self-giving is the act of giving one's self or one's time to others or a cause. Now, this definition doesn't at first glance sound like it really applies to husbands, and maybe even sounds a little ambiguous, if you will. But I'm going to help you see this in 3 different segments of the definition. The first one is, it is an act. The second one, it is internal and personal. And the third one, it will cost you time. These are 3 things that we will unpack in today's episode in hopes of growing to become a more self-giving husband. So the first one, it is an act. So first off, talk is cheap. Because actions, we all know they speak louder than words. If you are saying, I love you, but you're not doing anything that shows that you love your wife, you're going to miss the mark. Now, the beauty of self-giving is this is one of those attributes where what you believe or what you are saying that you are willing to do, you actually show up and you do. This is not something that you can say, oh yeah, I love you and I'm a self-giving husband without having any proof that you're a self-giving husband. So this is something that you do. Now, if you're intimidated by the fact that you have to give up some portion of yourself to your wife, I'm not talking about an arm or a leg or a lung, which, if you got to give an organ to your wife, maybe. That's, something that you guys have to discuss. But what I'm talking about is really time, right? And we're going to get into that, but it's really time. And it's also something that you can develop since it's an act. This is something that you can develop over time as you practice it more and more and more, right? I grew up playing basketball, and I remember my first couple games, I was not very good at playing the game. And as I practiced, as I paid attention to my coaches, I got better. And the same concept will happen with this particular attribute. The more you practice it, the better you're going to get, and the more familiar you're going to get, and the more self-aware you will be. Because the second portion of this definition is it is internal and personal. See, you have to want to do this. If your wife is telling you, oh, you have to give me time, and you're like, oh, I got to give you time, you're not really in a giving mood, right? This is why it has to be self-giving. You have to do this. This is yourself willing to give whatever it is, and it's going to be time. All right. This is not easy. This is hard because you have to overcome your own selfishness and become self-giving. See, I think everyone can relate to being selfish. I think we all have a little bit of selfishness inside of us. So this should not come as a surprise that when you are being self-giving, you're actually removing some of that selfishness of whatever you have, and you're giving to your wife what she deserves, which is you. And remember, this is a good thing. We want our wives to want us, because as soon as they stop wanting us, then you being self-giving is kind of going to be a mute attribute, because she's not going to want to receive whatever it is that you're trying to give her. So you got to be more self-giving, and she will want to, and she wants to want you. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, this is not an easy attribute to learn, and it's going to challenge you every single day, and all the way up until you get to a point where you are comfortable with this, right? It's going to be a challenge. And even when you're comfortable with it, it's going to be a challenge on the days when you have already set up something else and you're like, yeah, I'm about to go do this. And then your wife is like, hey, and then you're like, oh, and that's when it's going to become a real challenge for you. All right. Even if you're already comfortable. And that's where you and your wife have to have those conversations, because sometimes maybe you have something set up that you just can't reschedule. So I get it. And I'm not telling you that you just have to sacrifice every single time when your wife says, hey, I need this. But that comes down to how well do you communicate with what it is that you're trying to do. So it's not like if she's coming to you, she's not coming to you to sabotage whatever it is that you have going on, which, some wives may be that way. I'm not going to say that every wife is loving and caring, because we know that if it's true that husbands aren't all loving and caring, then it's probably true that wives aren't all loving and caring and willing to allow you to do the things that you're trying to accomplish. Some wives are challenging in that way, but we can still love them through all of those differences and challenges. And this is one of those ways that you can do that and overcome the issues that you have in your marriage when it comes to that. Now, the cost of time is the last thing inside of this particular definition that we're going to unpack. And time is one of the most valuable resources we all have available to us. And, depending on where you come from or what you believe, time could be this man-made construct. Moral of the story is we always have something that we need to do or that we want to do, and it takes time to do it. That's the currency. No matter what it is, everything that we do that we ever want to do takes time. All right. And that's just where we're going to leave that. Now, when it comes to building a relationship with your wife, guess what? It takes time. And it takes a heavy investment of your time to build that relationship and even to sustain that relationship. It's not going to just run on autopilot. If you think that your marriage is going to run on autopilot, I'm sorry. That's just not how marriage works. All right. You're going to have to deal with giving up some time so you can build your relationship. Now, I've mentioned these notes on this before, but I'm going to put them here just in case this is a first-time listener. The first thing you have to do when it comes to time is set it aside on your calendar every single day. Every single day. Now, I won't tell you how much time to set aside, because your calendar and your routine, that is your business, right? But it should be synchronized well with your wife, and she should know when the time is that you are, establishing that is dedicated to her. If you are self-employed, then, this is definitely going to be important for you. If you work a 9 to 5, this is going to be important for you. Now, whatever you need to do is, so the second thing is you have to prioritize the time that you set aside for your wife. If you're not prioritizing it, then it's just going to be a wasted effort, because every time you say, hey, this is your time on the calendar, but you don't show up, or you let someone else bump it or something else bump it, and it's not a mutual agreement that it should be bumped or a genuine emergency, and a genuine emergency, right? Uh, then you are going to lose credibility with even setting up this. And you are not going to become the self-giving husband that shows your wife love in this capacity. So you have to prioritize the time. And then the third thing is work faster or more efficient on the other things around that time. Now, this really goes to my self-employed individuals or people who they have extracurricular activities outside of their 9 to 5, right? Because if you're on hourly wages, then you got a clock in time and a clock out time. That's just the way it goes. However, if you are self-employed, then hours are a little bit different, and you got to be a little bit more flexible with the way that you run your hours. However, if you know that 8 o'clock is your time to spend with your wife, then you need to work more efficient on all the things that are leading up to 8 o'clock, and you need to work faster on those things. Now, I get it. Some things, they just take time because that's, again, the currency that we pay whenever we want to do something. But maybe you have to accomplish this in stages, whatever, that comes down to the efficiency piece. That is something you'll have to unpack for yourself. But the moral of the story is, I get a lot of guys who tell me, oh, well, I'm self-employed. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to do this. And I just don't get to make it back in time for my wife. And that goes back to the number 2 thing of prioritizing the time. Look, you can't show your wife genuine love if you're telling her that she comes after everything else that you've been trying to accomplish. That is not going to go over well with her. Now, she may understand, but the damage is already done. So, moral of the story, you got to work harder, you got to work faster, and you got to work more efficient on the things that you are trying to get accomplished. Being a self-giving husband is one of the single hardest ways of showing love to your wife. I'm challenged with this every single day personally, so I get it, guys. I'm not trying to be some white knight that shows up and says, look at me, I'm perfect. No, I'm a real husband, I'm a real man, and I have my challenges with loving my wife as well. However, I've made a resolve or a decision to be committed to showing my wife love every single day. And I try as much as I possibly can to reflect these 4 attributes that we're unpacking in these next couple episodes. But self-giving is probably one of the most challenging ones for me, because the reason this content is coming out later than I would prefer it to is because I had to prioritize the time with my wife, and I did not work more efficient or faster on getting these pre-recorded so that way they can launch when they need to. So you guys are experiencing firsthand that I'm putting my mouth or I'm putting my actions where my mouth is. So, I'm not some guy who just gets on here and says, hey, this is the answer, but I don't do it. Like, I do this, and I do struggle with this. So, moral of the story, hopefully that is encouraging to you, that you don't have to be perfect. I would say that my wife and I have a fantastic relationship, and I think she would say the same thing. Maybe I'll bring her on an episode later on, so she can just unpack all the things that I or that she witnesses that I do for her. And you guys can hear what she has to say. I'm not gonna persuade her to say anything or whatever. I'm just gonna let her share from her heart, which I think you guys would see that by putting in the effort, you will be able to build your relationship in a meaningful way. But if you don't put in the effort, then your relationship isn't going to grow. And that's what I want you guys to learn, that you put in the effort, and it's got to be good effort. Don't put subpar or little baby effort. All right. If all you got at the moment and you're just now starting and all you got is little baby effort, fine. Go ahead. Put that in. That's better than nothing. But as you develop your husband skills through practicing the drills that I offer here, or just taking some of the advice and applying it to your marriage, you should grow and become a more mature husband, which then requires more effort. It's like going to the gym and you lift heavy weights. As you start to develop your strength, you need to lift heavier weights. All right. So that's all I'm saying. The same concept happens here in our marriage, and that's just the way it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what I will tell you, over time, as the things you are giving up, which is your time, you'll realize the things that you're losing or perceivably losing are insignificant to the things that you will gain in your relationship with your wife, and the credibility that you're going to gain with your wife, and the way that you're showing her love will be reciprocated in such an amazing way. So that's all I got for you guys today. Check out marriagedrills.com. The link is in the description box below. And until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.